So I believe we are already recording, so we'll just have to start with the prayers. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudirayet shunvatam swakata krishnah punyashravana kirtanah hidayanto stiha padrani vidunoti suhsatam nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. So, we're continuing our discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto. And the previous session, we concluded chapter 13. And when we concluded chapter 13, we basically were discussing the principles of being able to focus on devotional service. How do we focus in devotional service? So it requires the establishment of an identity. That was the theme in the previous section. Because you cannot perform duties, you cannot discern duties and understand the components of a certain activity without having an identity. Without having a specific identity, one cannot fully recognize the Hare Krishna. I'm sorry, for some reason I got cut off. Apologize. There was some unstable connection on my end and it just cut me off. So, as we said, you cannot really perform duties and you cannot really perform, I would say, without having an identity, one cannot recognize Dharma. If you want to recognize the Dharma of an individual, then that individual's identity is very important. So we recognize our Dharma of being a father, mother, professional after assuming such an identity. And through different sources, we improve upon it. We improve upon it by hearing from Sadhu, Guru, Shastra. We refine it as we go along so that it can be performed to the best of our ability. And when one performs Dharma according to the specific nature which has been assumed in terms of the identity, then they're rewarded further in terms of them being able to move forward and move towards the higher goals of life. So the point which we are trying to make is one needs to understand that you cannot be efficient without focusing on an identity. When we come into our movement, which is ISKCON and also the different branches of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, basically when you come into and participate in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the entire focus of sadhana bhakti is to help us establish an identity. We start working on the identity right from the word go. The very first class, we are being given a lot of instructions which are associated with the identity. You hear things such as, you are a servant of God. You hear things such as, you have to chant the names of God, which would eventually bring you and make you a better servant. You sometimes hear also that when you chant, you are able to serve nicely. Why is it so? It is so because when we chant, we are coming in touch with Kṛṣṇa, and he is reinforcing our identity as his servant. And as a consequence, then we are able to move forward and we are able to perform and improve upon the activities associated with that identity. This is very important for us to understand that without establishing of the identity, there's so much instability in the internet here in Vrindavan. I apologize. And let's just continue. For some reason, for the last 2 weeks, we have been struggling. And I hope that I would also resolve whatever issues have to be resolved by this week. So kindly bear with me. For some reason, there's a lot of instability in the internet. So it is, and when the internet goes away, I lose my connection. And and I'm struggling with it. One moment, just give me one moment, please. I'm just going to
Yeah.
connect. One,
No problem, Prabhu.
somewhat of a better connection. Just give me a second. Okay, fantastic. Now, so the point we want to make is basically you need to work on your identity right from the word go. If you have multiple identities that you're working on during your life, then those multiple identities are going to distract you from the identity of being Krishna's servant. So let's understand this. You're going to be distracted from being Krishna's servant because you're also contributing to other identities. This was the situation with Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra was 100% contributing to the identity of being a king. And he had reached a stage where he had lost the kingdom. But the illusion of being a part of that kingdom and being in authority, being in power was still a part of his psychology. And as a consequence, he was just continuing to push towards that identity. It required someone like Vidura, whose intelligence was completely pure because he was in touch with the Lord's, he was in touch with the Lord, and he was also in touch with Shastra, he was in touch with sadhus. His intelligence was pure. He comes and he cuts the bond which Dhritarashtra has with the kingdom. The cutting of the bond is done by Vidura in the previous chapter. What does he say? He practically breaks down Dhritarashtra's situation, tells him that you are nothing but, a dependable, someone who is depending on the Pandavas for your maintenance, and you're still an illusion that you're a king. So that identity of Dhritarashtra had to be destroyed. The identity of Dhritarashtra had to be literally destroyed for him to leave the palace and proceed towards deeper realizations. And for many of us, that becomes a part of our spiritual growth. So some of us, for example, have a great deal of, I would say, investment of energy, investment of emotions, investment of time, etc., etc., all of those into a profession. So when the profession or the professional situation gets challenged, which is essentially the professional situation being destroyed by time, time destroys everything. When the professional identity is being destroyed by time, then we run towards a more permanent identity of being a servant of Krishna. So many of us, when we face challenges, either we think that we have to resolve the challenges without taking shelter of Krishna, or we think that we have to take deeper shelter of Krishna. But eventually, when the challenge becomes insurmountable and we are sincere in our heart, we take deeper shelter of the Lord. So the point is, an identity of being a professional in an organization, because it's a part of the material world, is sure to be destroyed. And when it gets destroyed, we run towards Krishna. Yeah, because that's a more permanent source of activity, permanent source of inspiration, and that's where we have been getting our happiness as well in different quantums. Some people, when the relationship with their partners or relationship with relatives, when that gets challenged, sometimes that identity gets challenged in different ways. Sometimes there is a parting of ways, sometimes there are disagreements, there are challenges, etc. When that particular identity of an individual gets challenged, it is essentially breaking down. The mode of ignorance accompanies each and every activity that we perform in this world right from the starting. When an activity begins, the mode of ignorance is a part of it. If you begin a relationship, the mode of ignorance is also a part of it. So the sustenance of the relationship literally depends on how long you can subdue the mode of ignorance. If the relationship is filled with sattva, if the relationship is deeply connected to Krishna, it sustains itself because sattva, goodness, can really sustain relationships, it can sustain anything. So when the Krishna factor is the singular common factor between two partners, then that Krishna factor has the ability to sustain that relationship for a very, very long time because Krishna is eternal. So spiritual energy can sustain things forever, material energy is bound to get destroyed. So as a consequence, when someone starts out and in an activity, in a partnership, in a job, in some kind of venture, then the mode of ignorance accompanies that particular activity from the word go. This is an understanding we should always have. It is not dependable. The mode of ignorance, the mode of passion, they're not dependable. How could you depend on something which is going to be transformed, which is going to change? Eventually, it's going to disappear. So material activity, which are material relationships, material identities, these identities get attacked because that's the nature of material energy. You can't really challenge that because that's a natural law. We get bewildered when that happens. There's no doubt that we get bewildered when that happens because we have invested enormous amount of energy into that venture. And that venture, when it gets shaky, when the foundation becomes shaky and we can't really proceed, then we run to Kṛṣṇa because there really isn't any other shelter. The wonderful aspect of a devotee's life is that Kṛṣṇa is always there. So you always turn to Kṛṣṇa for support. This support is not available for those who are not in touch with Kṛṣṇa. This is not available. And as a consequence, when someone who is completely situated in the material universe and all they can see around them is just matter, they can only see things which are connected to their body, then that particular situation is going to get challenged. And when it gets challenged, they suffer like anything. Why do they suffer so much? Because they just don't have anything else. Some people, for instance, in the 2008-2009 financial crisis in America, there were so many suicides. Why is it that someone would commit suicide if their job were to be lost? And these were people who were extraordinarily well qualified. It was not that they were without qualification. They had very good degrees. They had obviously had some kind of financial backing because they were working for some very large, very well-to-do companies on Wall Street. Many of them jumped to their death in 2008, 2009. And it is quite astonishing because for a devotee, this is quite astonishing. And the reason why it is astonishing is we start thinking it's just a job. Jobs come and jobs go. Why would you take such an extreme step just for a job? But then you have to realize that individual who jumps to his death and who commits suicide because he loses his job, they lose their livelihood, even though temporarily, for them, that is all they had. That was the only identity they had. And they were putting so much energy into just that particular identity. And that identity was already designed to be destroyed. We call organizations a going concern. You see, by definition, a company is supposed to last forever. An organization is supposed to last forever because that's by design, by law, they're created in perpetuity. But in reality, you see companies close down, shut down all the time, every year. Because the moment you start something in this world, destruction also accompanies that particular activity. So establishing and fostering and investing enormously into an activity which is distinctly connected just to this world is a dangerous proposition because you are investing in something which is absolutely on the path of destruction. And regardless of what you have done, you see, the Western world has history. The Indian history goes back to the Vedic times. Our history is Ramayana, Mahabharata. For the Western world, history starts with the Roman Empire. And if you notice, for the Western world, they study the activities of the Roman Empire quite deeply. There are departments of, I would say, classics. It's called the Department of Classics in every major university in the world. In America, American university is called the history department is called the Department of Classics. They study classic phenomena, which is, things which have existed for long. For them, that is the foundation. Western philosophy, Westerners in general, their whole foundation, their ideas, and their drawing of realization from history comes from the Roman Empire. It comes from the Roman Empire because that was the greatest accomplishment which Western world saw. Because the Roman Empire controlled vast tracts of land, all the way from Italy, all the way to France, England even. Yeah, to some extent. The point which we're just trying to make here is for them, their understanding comes from the Roman Empire. And what happened to the Roman Empire? The Roman Empire collapsed. So that understanding that things can break down is very clear in the Western philosophical mind. They're clear. But if you notice, the patterns of how things break down have not changed. The Roman Empire collapsed because there was decadence. They were completely engaging in sense gratification. They expanded their empires based on sense gratification. They expanded it simply because they could plunder, they could loot, and they could bring back valuables to Rome. It collapsed. It was completely sense gratification, and as a consequence, it just collapsed. What was the main activity of the kings of Rome, the emperors of Rome? How did they pacify the population? They pacified the population by providing very violent entertainment. If you study Roman history, you will notice that the big Colosseum, the big arena, every king, every new emperor used to feed the psychology of the population by giving them games which involved murder. Two people killing themselves, the gladiatorial games. You've heard of the gladiators. They used to kill themselves in the Colosseum. And what was the purpose? The purpose was that the Roman emperors recognized that their population was Shudra. They recognized that this population's quality and their intellectual capabilities were very Shudra-like. So they needed to be fed. Their sense gratification had to be given. What was the entertainment which was ordered then? The entertainment that was given those days in the Roman Empire was very, very intensely violent bloodshed. Care to just examine the entertainment as of today in the Western world? The so-called entertainment in the Western world, and even India for that matter, the whole world, is just suffering. The whole idea of entertainment today is just suffering. All you see is just great suffering in what they're trying to promote. They're talking about death, they're talking about murders, they're talking about policemen catching murderers, serial murderers. This is entertainment as of today. This has got no difference. There's no difference between what this is and what it was 2,000, 3,000 years back when the Roman Empire was there. So the collapse of material civilization is happening on a daily basis because you can see this, and it is very easy to observe just by observing their entertainment standards. Their entertainment standards are the same as what it was 3,000 years back. It has completely degenerated itself to great violence. There's just great violence. And they perpetuate this violence on others. So there have been so many different wars which were fought. World War I, World War II, so many different crises. These are mass killings. Why did this come about? Because there's a certain idea of violence which is a part of society. So the point which I'm just trying to make here is that this whole concept of economy, whole concept of what a nation is, and the whole concept of what is the future and the state of permanence and so on and so forth is all completely in a foundation which is very weak. It is already getting destroyed as we see it, and these are examples. So the Western philosophers, even today, Western philosophers, they have a good idea that there's great destruction which is coming because they can see parallels between what Rome did and what the Western economies are doing. And India is joining suit as well. I'm not sparing India just because India is anyway connected to Kṛṣṇa. India is not connected to Kṛṣṇa. It is just that it is fortunate that the spiritual world manifested itself in India, and so many different things happened in Bharatvarsha. The concept of India is very different spiritually. So the point I'm just trying to make is destruction of what is around us is imminent. It's just a matter of time. Even if you call 50 years, reasonable amount of time, or 100 years, many things which are a part of our lives would get destroyed because it's a part of material culture. So the idea of establishing a future and permanence based on these identities is falsehood. It is actually utter nonsense because it is stupidity as well. You put in effort to the level to which you need so that you could maintain your body. You put in effort to the level to which it is needed so that we could run whatever is required whilst we are on this planet. That is prudence. And we put most of our time into Kṛṣṇa consciousness because that's permanent. Then a part of you is always permanent. You see, that doesn't change. Kṛṣṇa cannot be taken away from us. The identity of being Kṛṣṇa's servant can never be taken away from us. It cannot be. If you're putting a lot of effort in establishing that identity, if you're watering the roots on a daily basis by chanting Harinam, if you're giving yourself to that particular identity fully to the extent to which you can, whilst maintaining yourself and understanding that the impermanent circumstances of our economy, relationships, so on and so forth, are that they are just impermanent. So we need to take care of all of that as a matter of duty, whilst we put all our energies into what is called permanence. This is prudent. This is prudent. This is an investment. This is a real investment, and this can exist in perpetuity simply because by nature it's eternal. The relationship is eternal. By nature, we are eternal. Kṛṣṇa is eternal. By nature, we are pleasure seekers, and pleasure is our objective because the soul is always seeking pleasure, because by nature the soul is eternally happy. So it's going to constantly look for that. And we are filled with knowledge. The point which I'm just trying to make is that the previous chapter focused very clearly on the fact that you need to establish an identity and follow the duties, and that might require some sense of really looking at where our life is and then planning ahead so that we would be able to absorb ourselves more and more into permanence, which is what we observed in the previous chapter. So Dhritarashtra leaves home, he goes to the forest. Why the forest? Why can't this be done in the palace? Why would Dhritarashtra have to leave the palace and go to the forest? Because if he goes to the forest, he is going to have a certain sense of dependence on nature. If he goes to the forest, then life is going to be simpler because you have to depend on nature. Yeah? So everything is going to get arranged because of dependence on nature. That's the mode of goodness. So you at least need to establish the mode of goodness for you to transcend. You need to use that as a platform. So we saw very effectively that he left for the forest. Our process of chanting the holy names does not require us to go anywhere. However, there really is a need for us to understand that there will be a time when we need to put in 100% of our time into this process. Not necessarily chanting throughout the day, because that's wonderful if you can do it. Not necessarily reading throughout the day, that is wonderful if you can do it. Making ourselves available for this movement so that our identity is fully shaped by the future of this movement, which Lord Chaitanya started. This is very important because you do that and then you are embarking on a journey which is eternal and you're contributing to it on a daily basis in profundity. If you don't do that, then your contributions to whatever we have been doing, if it exceeds what is required to maintain ourselves at the bare minimum, then you are contributing to waste. This is very important for us to understand. This is very, very important for us to understand because you can't really continue a process which constantly brings you nothing. We can't contribute to it endlessly. We can't. So understand that there is something about being in this world and focusing on having some time where in the future, desiring that we can contribute 100%. The desiring part has to start today. If the desiring part of wanting to contribute 100% were to start today, then it would give us an opportunity at some point in the future to mold our lifestyles to reach that conclusion. You can't really land into a circumstance of 100% contribution to Kṛṣṇa consciousness whilst it has never been thought about for years and years and years. There's a necessity to desire 100% contribution, so that at some point in time, we will have an opportunity to plan for that. This is really required, which is the reason why it's a part of Srimad Bhagavatam. What are the kings doing when they leave their kingdoms? When they leave their kingdoms, which are vast, centers of opulence, and they're going away to the forest, they are basically going away with an understanding that this is impermanent and I need to focus on the permanent part. I should start focusing on the permanent part when I still have energy, when I still have a body which can function to some level of efficiency. So this is very important for us to gain from these particular chapters, saying that this is an example. Now, does it really mean that we have to do it exactly as he did it? No. It simply means that we start desiring that at some point in the future, our contribution to Krishna consciousness should be 100%. If I have 8 hours of work time today, at some point in the future, I want to be able to offer that entire 8 hours into direct service of Lord Chaitanya, be it administratively, be it distribution of books, be it contributing in whatever way you can. At some point, that desire has to be there, because then you are literally moving towards a goal which is situated in permanence, whilst managing your time. And when you start desiring it, then it will start manifesting as well. It's very important for us to start desiring such outcomes, because whoever we are today was desired for several years. And here we are. Whoever we are today was also a part of arrangements and desires over several lifetimes. So the future can also be planned accordingly, where we start understanding that this is the outcome that I want for the future, and I desire this. If that desire is associated with Kṛṣṇa, then there's great power for us to accomplish such desires. Then you move towards life and move through life having those desires, and then we start concretizing, we start putting a strong foundation towards those desires. So it's very important for us to take lessons from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and we start living the Srimad Bhagavatam. How do you live the previous chapter? Hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and living Srimad Bhagavatam are two different things. The hearing process is supposed to train our mind to think in a certain way, which is what a preacher should be doing. When they give classes, they are supposed to be motivating desires. When class is being given, the speaker is supposed to be motivating desires in a certain direction. The Bhagavatam in the previous chapter is directing us and telling us that this is how you ought to be living. How do you live it? How do you live it today if it were to be a plan that has to be executed 20 years hence? You live it today by desiring such an outcome, thinking about it, reflecting upon it, understanding, are we really desiring it? If you're not really desiring it, why aren't we really desiring it? What is our desire today? What is our focus today? Start taking inventory of what's in your hearts. Because this is not going to be accomplished without planning. This is not going to be accomplished without active participation in stimulation of spiritual phenomena, meaning Sangha, Bhagavatam, chanting. It can't be accomplished unless you have some stimulation. Coming to the Dham, looking around and feeling the dust of Vrindavan upon ourselves at least as many times as you can, you see. The point I'm trying to make is all of this is how we're going to be moving towards a goal, but we eventually need to start living the Bhagavatam. When you start thinking and planning according to Srimad Bhagavatam, we are living the Bhagavatam. And the objective of all these sessions is to live the Bhagavatam, because if we can't live the Bhagavatam, it is useful to hear, but if we can't implement, then there's something missing. So we need to be able to live the Bhagavatam as well. So we start actively desiring, planning, managing, so we can move towards it. If material life and material activity require planning, what to say of spiritual activity? It requires more planning. Yeah. If this particular existence requires some planning, some vision of the future, and some kind of goal setting, some kind of saying, this is not working, this is working. Yeah. Then what about spiritual life? You need to do that as well for that. There are some who believe that these are very, very, I would say, modern concepts. No, they are not modern concepts. Kṛṣṇa and his expansions planned material existence for years and years and years. There's great planning when Kṛṣṇa descends on the planet. There's great planning in terms of who is going to be around him. There's great planning in terms of what activities he's going to perform. Yeah. So if you notice material, I would say, manifestation of how the world is run, how the universes are managed by Kṛṣṇa's potencies, you will notice enormous planning. So there's great strategy. He appears at a certain time. He sends his servants at a certain time. And he appears and he acts out in a certain way. Yeah, he interacts with a certain group of people. He leaves certain messages. There is great planning. Yeah, you can't really say that Kṛṣṇa appears without a plan. There's great planning. These are not random events. There's great planning, and they're executed. They're adjusted for improbabilities. All of those things happen. That's something which we notice when we read scripture, is that there's great planning. So since there's great planning from Kṛṣṇa's side, then there has to be great planning from our side for us to be able to take advantage. And our plan has to have a foundation. You need to think about the future. You need to understand what is working, what is not working. And you start contributing towards a certain future. How do you start contributing? You develop desires. You start desiring actively. Start examining whether that really is what we want to do. And if that is something that I really want to do, where am I? Where should I be going? How many years do I have from me to where I ought to be going? At what age? This is very, very important because it requires that kind of intensity. When you engage your mind in thinking about a Kṛṣṇa conscious future, you literally are becoming more Kṛṣṇa conscious. You see, when you engage your mind in thinking about a Kṛṣṇa conscious future, you literally are Kṛṣṇa conscious. Along with it comes the wisdom that it may take many years to reach that conclusion. When Kṛṣṇa sees that in our hearts, the sincerity of wanting to absorb ourselves in his activities, wanting to absorb ourselves in his service, when he sees that in our hearts, this is just increasing qualitatively and quantitatively, then he will make all kinds of arrangements. The demigods will cooperate. Everybody will cooperate. And then you will suddenly find that whatever you desired is manifesting, if not in the 100% way you wanted, at least 60, 70, 80% of what you wanted, or what you felt that it was appropriate for you to move forward. Because then there is agreement. There's agreement from the spiritual sky that this is what you ought to be doing. So please understand that there is great planning, and that is evidenced in Shastra. And Srimad Bhagavatam is not to be heard alone, it has to be lived. Living Srimad Bhagavatam requires taking precepts, taking principles, and using them and contextually understanding the time, place, and circumstances as of today, and then taking it forward. But it requires some deep thought. We can't just go from one class to the other, one day to the other, 1 week to the other, year after year, and then we find that we haven't really moved much. Why is it so? It's because we really didn't take the part of Srimad Bhagavatam from just hearing Srimad Bhagavatam to living Srimad Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam expects us to live Srimad Bhagavatam. This requires contribution. This requires thought. This requires chanting. Harinam, 100%. Coming in touch with sadhus, coming in touch with the Dham, then you develop certain kind of desires, and life manifests in a certain way because you're starting to think about it in certain ways. You're putting energy. And if you don't foster your eternal identity, which is what we're doing when we go into the temple, practically you have a Sunday feast. The Sunday feast is designed to give us a glimpse of certain activities which are done in the spiritual sky. Number one, it is Kṛṣṇa-centered. Number two, there is Kirtan, Kṛṣṇa's names. There's dance. There has to be a wonderful feast. We have to really hit upon all the ingredients of a Sunday feast. Then what does happen is that it really becomes a platform for transformation. And then people are able to take advantage when they walk in and they walk out. They have some kind of a glimpse of very powerful spiritual potency. Then they walk out. Yeah. So the point which I'm just trying to make is that there's a necessity for really understanding how Shastra is to be applied practically. Shastra is expecting us to take what has already been done and apply it today. Shastra is expecting us to understand that history repeats itself. It's a fact. Roman history is repeating itself in the Western Hemisphere. It is, because for years and years and years it has been studied, and that's their history. They basically study it again and again. Our history is eternal. The Vedic history that we are looking at is eternal. We are looking at Mahabharata, we are looking at the Ramayana. We go back millions and millions of years, and we have an experience that has been given to us through Shastras, through Sadhu, through Nam, especially through the holy names, which allows us to go back thousands of years into the past, and we are able to live that history today. And what is very important for each and every one of us to know is that Kṛṣṇa consciousness is an absolutely scientific process. Why am I using the word scientific? Is because if 10 people were to try the process and 100 people were to try, they would have not the same experience, they would have similar experiences. There are stages. Those stages have been documented. Symptoms of those stages have been documented. Everything has been given to us by our acharyas because they've gone through these experiences. They've lived the Bhagavatam. After living the Srimad Bhagavatam, they have derived experiences. They have written down the realizations and packaged it and given it to us. Srila Prabhupada came and he gave us Srimad Bhagavatam. He drew from so many different acharyas and so many different preceptors in our line parampara, and he has given all of this as a part of encouraging us to follow suit. So we don't need to basically, I would say, reinvent the wheel because it's already here. Srimad Bhagavatam has the details. But we need to understand that real experiences and real effects of Srimad Bhagavatam are to be experienced only if we also plan to live according to the Bhagavatam. Then life would be very different. Now you have a purpose. 10 years hence, 15 years hence, and I'm not saying it should be 10 years hence, 15 years hence, it can be 20, it can be 5. But desiring life according to Bhagavatam is required. And what is it that you need to desire? You need to desire 100% contribution to the identity of being Krishna's servant. Qualitatively and quantitatively, being able to absorb ourselves day and night in being able to serve Him. And we all can distinguish how and when it can be done. We all have had experiences of putting enormous amount of time when a festival comes in making the festival work. And when we put enormous amounts of time in making a festival work and event work, we also notice that we come out of it quite enthusiastic. It actually is extraordinarily powerful. So if you have a big Janmashtami festival, it very, very highly motivates the community. They put in hours and hours and hours, and sometimes while putting in those hours and hours and hours trying to organize things, they may not feel very comfortable because they haven't slept enough, eaten properly, etc., etc. They have pushed away all their tasks to the following week or 2 weeks, and they're kind of, they feel a little bit, I would say, quite weary and tired. But once you complete the festival and you come out, you feel far more energetic and far more purposeful than you ever did. And why is this so? It is so because you have basically absorbed yourself in the identity of being Krishna's servant, even if it was just for a week. And that absorption changes the course of our future. This is very, very important to understand that absorption is required. So these are glimpses. These are basically what we would call as tastes, small, I would say, examples or samples of what to expect. Now, when we put in all our energy and we focus on this for the future fully, then we find a lot of things change for us. And we are able to move from one platform to the other quite effectively. So please understand that this requires absorption. It requires fostering the identity. It is just like anything else. You put enormous energy into your identity of being X, Y, Z. then you will see some results. But because it's a part of material energy, it is going to get destroyed. Why am I speaking so much about destruction? Chapter 14 is entitled The Disappearance of Lord Kṛṣṇa. The Lord appears on this planet and he disappears. He doesn't stay back in a literal sense. His pastimes are manifest and then they become unmanifest to the eye. This is Kṛṣṇa, this is Lord Ram. He appears, he changes quite a few things, he executes his mission, and then he disappears from view. In Vrindavan, the pastimes of the Lord are continuing because this is eternal. This is the spiritual sky. They're continuing, but they are unmanifest. You can't see them. 5,000 years back, they were fully manifest. You could see them. So if the Lord himself and his activities, which are eternal, they are manifest and then they're unmanifest, the Lord appears and he disappears. What to say of us and what to say of the activities that we do? It's all the more important for us to realize this because this is very critical. So there's a need for greater contribution, greater focus, greater planning. Now let's look at chapter 14 and we'll read through chapter 14. I want to do chapter 14 and 15 together. I wanted to just set the stage so that we could take both chapters together between today and the following week. And I also wanted to set the stage so we understand that when we are listening to Srimad Bhagavatam, please understand that there's a practical side to this. And the practical side has to be understood. If you don't understand the practical side to it, what is it and how to live the Srimad Bhagavatam, then what does happen is that we could be wasting an opportunity. So I tend to kind of draw out principles that can be applied, but I'm requesting you also to study Srimad Bhagavatam from the perspective of saying that there must be a purpose for something to be written here. This is Kṛṣṇa himself. This is non-different from Kṛṣṇa. There must be a purpose for a specific activity which has been mentioned here. What should I glean from this? What should I learn from this? When you approach Srimad Bhagavatam prayerfully with the perspective of wanting to live Srimad Bhagavatam, then you would find a lot of things being revealed. It has to be approached very prayerfully. Prayerfully, basically requesting Prabhupada's mercy, requesting your Guru's mercy if you're initiated, and basically also approaching Srimad Bhagavatam with deep respect, understanding it is dynamic, it's completely conscious, this is non-different from Kṛṣṇa. I need to basically approach it that way. Okay? So let's read it. Let's read the few verses, and then I will end in another 10 minutes, and then we will take a combination of this and the next chapter the following week, which would be more focused on the specific outcomes of these verses. Sri Sutta Goswami said, Arjuna went to Dwaraka to see Lord Sri Kṛṣṇa and other friends, and also to learn from the Lord of his next activities. After a few months passed, and Arjuna did not return, Maharaj Yudhishthira then began to observe some inauspicious omens which were fearful in themselves. Omens are true. They are a part of what needs to be observed in nature. And if one understands omens and they understand the signs of omens, this is called Nimitta Shastra. Omen in Sanskrit is Nimitta. Nimitta Shastra, there's an entire body of study which focuses on omens. Why? Because these omens were a source of, I would say, information from the atmosphere. Yeah? This was a source of information from the atmosphere in reality. So as a consequence, Yudhishthira Maharaj was observing inauspicious omens. So there's a categorization of what is auspicious and what is inauspicious. And omens can be studied. Even today, there are many, many omens which can come through while we exist. If we have the ability to be situated in the mode of goodness, these omens become more manifest. You can see it. You can also study it. Then there are certain outcomes which can be learned from those. Yeah? Now, we're going to read about what omens Yudhishthira Maharaj saw and why was it that he became quite petrified? Why was he so fearful? He saw that the direction of eternal time had changed, and this was very fearful. there were disruptions in seasonal regularities. The people in general had become very greedy, angry, and deceitful. And he saw that they were adopting foul means of livelihood. Yeah? So the word which is being used in this verse is kalasya chagatim raudram. Kalasya chagatim raudram. Raudram, very specifically, involves the idea of becoming fearful because there are certain very fearful manifestations around us. Raudram means fears, right? Maharaudra, Narasimhadev is called Maharaudra. So basically, this is a very fierce manifestation of the Lord, which can put fear into the hearts of those who are demoniac. So now we see that the word which is being used here is kalasya gatim raudram. Kalasya, which means that which pertains to time. The time factor of this world is called kala. It is destructive by nature. As a consequence, it basically creates a past, a present, and a future. Every body that exists today is going to be destroyed. So there's a certain future for the body. And in future, there's been a past. So kala, the time factor, essentially means that this is Kṛṣṇa's force. It is undefeatable because it destroys everything when the time comes. Now, Yudhishthira Maharaj is basically making a statement first. He's saying, kalasya gatim raudram. And when he's saying kalasya gatim raudram, he is basically arrived at a conclusion that the time factor, the eternal time factor, the time factor which basically is destructive, has taken on a very destructive manifestation. How does he know? He is observing omens and he has reached conclusions that time has changed. And what are those omens that he is talking about? There were disruptions in seasonal regularities. Now, do we see disruptions in seasonal regularities today? Yes. Practically, there's so much disparity and there's so much irregularity in seasons that are observed today. So does this mean that the nature of time as we observe it in 2020, 2019, etc., is very fierce? The answer is yes, it is very destructive. It is a very destructive phase when you find that seasonal irregularities exist. And you find basically that there are certain observations that the seasons themselves are not acting according to what they are meant to do. This is a manifestation that it is destructive. Because a season is supposed to sustain a crop. Agriculture is sustained by seasons, by timely arrivals of monsoon. Yeah? Quite surprising. When you live in the West, you make an assumption that when you open the tap in the bathroom, water is supposed to flow out. This is an absolute assumption made in the West. If you live in the West, never do you expect that you open the tap and water doesn't come. But that particular phenomenon of opening the water and nothing coming out is everyday business in India, in many parts of India. Many parts of India, the major cities of India, they are without water, or their drains and so on and so forth, and management of water is so dismal that when monsoon comes, it's destructive. They don't capture anything for the next year. They don't capture anything for the next year. So this whole idea of seasonal irregularities means agriculture is going to be very, very hampered. If agriculture is hampered, food is going to be scarce. If food is scarce, people are going to become quite revolting, and people are also going to have natures. They're all going to fall into the survival consciousness. When an entire population starts looking to just survive, their standard of existence has dropped to the level of animals. This is basically a manifestation of destruction. Destruction occurs where you first see seasonal irregularities. Seasonal irregularities means agriculture is going to be disrupted. There is not going to be a situation of bountiful crops. There might be circumstances where you might basically find that the quality of crops themselves are quite questionable. And then you have so many different interventions these days in terms of genetic modification of crops, etc., to meet this particular seasonal irregularity. So they have this then, the next situation that is being seen. Seasonal irregularity means then there is going to be fierce interference with body clocks. Yeah. So health becomes very, very temperamental because, you have rains one day and then you have heat next day, and it is all completely out of whack. And the body is not meant to adapt to such changes on a daily basis, but it does. So what we are noticing is that we are living in very destructive times. And this has absolutely no doubt. And this was observed by Yudhishthira. So now we also learn during Yudhishthira's times, 5,000 years back, this was such a rarity. Seasonal irregularity was such a rarity that it became a part of being recorded in Srimad Bhagavatam. Today, if you were to write that the seasons are irregular and make a statement, will it be powerful? No, because it's happening all the time. If it were to be a rarity, then such a statement will have a lot of, weight. In Sri Yudhishthira's times, 5,000 years back, seasonal, irregularities were observed, and this is a bad omen because he understood that the factor of time, kalasya gatim raudram. Gati means direction. Gati means to basically create a certain outcome by walking in a certain direction. So kalasya gatim, if kala were to go in that particular direction, then nothing can be said, but it is only going to be fearful. There's going to be fierce times. That's the first statement. Yeah. Then he says the people in general had become very greedy, angry, and deceitful. Why? Scarcity or a feeling of fear that things will not be available had already come into the minds and consciousness of people. So now, do we have in today's world very greedy, angry, and deceitful populations? Absolutely. That's in real nature. It's very rare not to have that happening. It's very rare not to have anger, not to have greed, and not to have deceit. This was quite an exception 5,000 years back, and it became an observation of Yudhishthira Maharaj that this is a bad omen, which means that the direction of time has changed. Time goes through goodness, passion, ignorance. Right? Time goes through the 4 yugas. When it is going through the 4 yugas, it is manifesting itself in different levels of goodness. Satya Yuga, complete goodness, very high level of goodness, very little level of destruction. Treta Yuga, more destruction. Dwapara, more. Kali, complete destruction. So the time factor is manifesting itself in terms of sattva, rajas, and tamas. And as it manifests more and more destructive nature, it is also observed in the population. And he saw that they were adopting foul means of livelihood. Yeah? This was such a rare event 5,000 years back that it is written here that this is a bad omen because he found people were adopting foul means of livelihood. These days, it's quite common. Very, very common. Cheating is very common. Cheating others, trying to make money out of cheating. Somehow or the other, you can't, depend on anything. Even in Vrindavan, for instance, you can go to a grocery store and you will have gradations of dal. Then we were in a grocery store in Loy Bazaar 2 months back. We were not fully aware of what goes on here. And then there was, besan flour, chickpea flour. There was something for 60 rupees and there was something for 70 rupees per kilo or 80 rupees per kilo. And we asked them, what's the difference? Why is it because I have never seen besan of 2 different qualities or 3 different qualities, because we've lived in the West for so long that we used to just go to the supermarket and buy something, and we never used to see that there were 2 different gradations and qualities. And he just started telling us that this is mixed with other stuff. We don't know what it is mixed with. We just do not know how toxic that flour is. And what are they gaining out of it? 10 rupees. Completely insignificant, but they are selling it in the market. And this is very common. This is Loy Bazaar here in Vrindavan. Yeah, we stopped going there, but then we understood that it is all contaminated. We also understood that you could get sick if you were to eat the stuff which is 10 rupees less or 10 rupees more. So this is foul means of livelihood. Foul, very foul means of livelihood, where You deliberately mix things which are completely corrupt, and then you're providing it to the population. We read in the news a month ago that they shut down a false milk factory in Madhya Pradesh. And these guys were supplying to practically central India, northern India. They were sending milk trucks. It was false milk. All kinds of contaminated stuff were put together, very little milk, 30% milk, 70% contaminant. You can imagine people could fall very sick after drinking milk, and milk is supposed to be sattvic. Foul means of livelihood. This is exactly what it is. Foul means of livelihood, where there are no boundaries. There are absolutely no boundaries to cross in terms of wanting to make money. Now let's look at text further. He's continuing with the bad omens, and we can identify with it very much today. All ordinary transactions and dealings became polluted with cheating, even between friends. And in familial affairs, there was always misunderstanding between fathers, mothers, and sons, between well-wishers and between brothers. Even between husband and wife, there was always strain and quarrel. Bad omen observed by Yudhishthira Maharaj is all kinds of quarrels amongst those who are actually not supposed to be quarreling. This is destructive. He is making a sense. This is basically an omen. This is an omen where there's such intense fighting going on between people who are not supposed to be doing that, that the time factor has become destructive in that particular family, that particular connection. This is quite fascinating to see that what we accept as the norm in the modern day was found to be an omen for destruction 5,000 years back. It's quite fascinating to see this. What we expect as a norm, today. Everybody has ample stories to share about disagreements amongst close relatives. Everybody, practically, every family. And that particular phenomenon of disagreement among family members was actually counted on as a negative omen by Yudhishthira Maharaj that the time factor had become destructive. Because this is destruction. This is just destruction. That's what this is. In course of time, it came to pass that people in general became accustomed to greed, anger, pride, etc. Maharaj Yudhishthira, observing all these omens, spoke to his younger brother. Maharaj Yudhishthira said to his younger brother Bhimasena. So this is Yudhishthira speaking to Lord Bhima, saying, Arjuna has been gone for so long to Dwaraka. He hasn't returned, and I'm feeling all these negativity around. There must be something which is happening which is very inauspicious. I sent Arjuna to Dwaraka to meet his friends and to learn from the personality of Godhead Kṛṣṇa of his program of work. Since he departed, 7 months have passed, yet he has not returned. I do not know factually how things are going there. Is he going to quit his earthly pastimes, as Devarishi Narada indicated? Has that time already arrived? From him only all our kingly opulence, good wives, lives, progeny, control over our subjects, victory over our enemies, and future accommodations in higher planets have become possible. All this is due to his costless mercy upon us. Just see, O man, with a tiger's strength, how many miseries due to celestial influences, earthly reactions, and bodily pains, all very dangerous in themselves, are foreboding danger in near future by deluding our intelligence. See, he's using 3 words here. He's talking about celestial influences, he's talking about earthly reactions, and he's talking about bodily pains. So, celestial influences, Adi, Daivik. These are threefold miseries. We also call it threefold miseries. Adi, Daivik, celestial influences. The Devas not being propitiated properly or not being given what they're supposed to be given on a timely fashion, they unleash all kinds of destruction on the planet. This is Adi Daivik, celestial influences. Earthly reactions, and bodily pains. So there is basically earthly reactions, you can say Adi Bhautik, Yeah. Adi Bhautik means there are others who live amongst us in society who are causing harm to us, where the population has become extraordinarily, I would say, fallen into the mode of ignorance, that just being around them and being with them can cause destruction because they are destructive by mentality. So this is Adi Bhautik. And then there is Adhyatmik. This is bodily pains. Yeah, basically your own karma is such that you're experiencing all kinds of tribulations. So there is Adi Daivik, Adi Bhautik, Adhyatmik. 3 different levels of miseries. Yeah, and these miseries are being spoken of here. So he's basically saying that these miseries are so dangerous because the devas, people around us who have been conspiring and who have been planning to put an end to our existence, and then our own weaknesses. Kṛṣṇa, by his presence, has saved us from all of this. The left side of my body, this is Yudhishthira continuing, the left side of my body, my thighs, arms, and eyes are all quivering again and again. I'm having hot palpitations due to fear. All this indicates undesirable happenings. So this is again further elaboration of what we would call omens. Left side of the body, thighs, arms, and eyes all quivering again and again. Yeah. So this is being spoken of as being extraordinarily inauspicious. Just see, O Bhima, how the she-jackal cries at the rising sun and vomits fire, and how the dog barks at me fearlessly. So just see, O Bhima, how the she-jackal, basically the rising of the jackal in the morning and then howling when the sun is rising is being given as an omen. And he is also basically saying vomiting fire. Vomiting fire is a phenomenon. It's practically, I think, some set of circumstances which make it seem as if the jackal is vomiting fire. And then you have the dogs barking at me fearlessly. He's saying the dogs are barking at me fearlessly. This is an animal which is supposed to be subdued, domesticated, and this animal is losing its domestic quality and is becoming fierce. So that's also a contradiction. He's observing this as an omen. O Bhimasena, tiger amongst men, now useful animals like the cows are passing me on my left side, and lower animals like the asses are circumambulating me. My horses appear to weep upon seeing me. So this is basically the cows are passing me on my left side, inauspicious. See, this is again an example of an omen. He's observing this. You see, for example, if you were to see a funeral or a dead body passing you on the left-hand side whilst you're proceeding towards important work, that's considered to be a good omen because the inauspicious is passing you on your left side and auspicious is supposed to pass you on the right. So this is an omen. So people observe it. They basically observe how things are, and this is how people used to live. It might seem like reading tea leaves, and it might seem like, doesn't make sense, but they could draw a lot of conclusions based on this. They were experts in it. It was their life. Like for instance, now we have the weatherman. We have so many different sources of information for us to understand if a journey is going to be fruitful, should I even take the journey, so on and so forth. But those days they had their own means of understanding what was auspicious. They could predict the outcome based on an initial experience, coming in touch with someone. Yeah. So something inauspicious passing by the left is considered good, but something auspicious passing by the left is not considered good because the left is a source where you're giving up on things. If you want something to reduce, then the left-hand side is done. It is basically left-hand side for reducing certain things. And then the right-hand side is where it increases. So as a consequence, he's looking at these omens, he's making a comment. He's basically observing the atmosphere, saying, these are all the things which are making me think that the time factor has changed course. It has deteriorated. The time factor, kalasya gatim ati raudram. You see, kalasya gatim raudram. Just see, this pigeon is like a messenger of death. The shirks of the owls and their rival crows make my heart tremble. it appears that they want to make a void of the whole universe. It was quite significant. Several years back in 2004, there were massive tsunamis which afflicted the southern coast of India. And what was observed, not only India, it was in Indonesia, I think Bali, some parts, different places which are on the southern hemisphere. So what used to happen, a phenomenon that was observed was animals used to have their instincts very, very clear. They used to run for shelter hours before a tsunami used to come. It was almost observed that they used to run deeper inland because they had a sense of wanting to escape the tsunami. So they had a sense of being able to observe phenomenon around them which didn't make sense, and they used to run for shelter inwards. Yeah, they used to go deeper into the land to escape the water. So animals have this kind of an instinct of being able to escape from dangers, and that is basically also a part of, I would say, what Yudhishthira Maharaj is talking about. He's saying basically the shirks of owls and rival crows. He's basically making an observation. All of this is not proper. They normally do this when there's danger, and they seem to be doing it now. Just see how the smoke encircles the sky. It appears that the earth and the mountains are throbbing. Just hear the cloudless thunder and see the bolts from the blue. The wind blows violently, blasting dust everywhere and creating darkness. Clouds are raining everywhere with bloody disasters. The rays of the sun are declining, and the stars appear to be fighting amongst themselves. Confused living entities appear to be ablaze and weeping. Rivers, tributaries, ponds, reservoirs, and the mind are all perturbed. Butter no longer ignites fire. This is a very important observation. Butter not lighting fire is a complete contradiction of its ability. Now that's being observed by Yudhishthira Maharaj. And I have seen it too. I have seen certain situations where before I perform a yajna, if the butter, even though it was just recently melted and it is warm and it is hot, if it solidifies, preventing the yajna from going forward, that is inauspicious. These are all inauspicious signs which happen. You can observe it even whilst you engage in devotional service, devotional activities, etc. Yeah, we can observe it. When the deity worship standard in a community, in a temple, the deity worship standard starts falling, you will notice all kinds of quarrels. You will notice all kinds of differences come up in the community. All kinds of breakages of relationships would occur if the deities are upset because they are not being worshipped properly. So that's also like an omen. It's almost like if you have too many differences occurring in a community, too many differences occurring in a temple, then one needs to immediately go and start examining the deity worship standards, because this is completely bona fide to see if the deity worship standards are being done properly. Because the deities are not worshipped properly in a community, in a temple, you will see all kinds of differences come up amongst our community members. All kinds of differences, all kinds of inauspicious events occur as well. The calves do not suck the teats of the cows, nor do the cows give milk. They are standing crying, tears in their eyes, and the bulls take no pleasure in pasturing grounds. The deities seem to be crying in the temple, lamenting and perspiring. They seem about to leave. All the cities, villages, towns, gardens, mines, and hermitages are now devoid of beauty and bereft of all happiness. I do not know what sort of calamities are now awaiting us. See, the deities leaving literally means that when you bring a deity, Archa Vigraha of Kṛṣṇa and Radharani, and you perform the installation ceremony, and the deity is invoked into the form of the Vigraha, that particular deity, if the deity is not served properly, or if there are challenges basically in the overall circumstances of how the deities are being served, the deities can leave. So the Vigraha remains, the form of Kṛṣṇa remains, the deity form remains, but the deity who is installed within can leave. They can leave. Srila Prabhupada, because of who he was and being so proximate to Krishna, he used to visit the temples and he used to stand before the deities when he used to enter the temples. He used to meditate on the deities for a few moments. Sometimes he would turn around very angrily at the management, and this would be just after coming and having darshan. He will have darshan, and then he will turn around very angrily at the management and say, why is it that such and such is happening? Why is it that these deities are not being worshipped properly? What have you been doing? He would just take the management teams down after just standing before the deities for a few minutes and having darshan, because he would very clearly notice that the deities are not happy. The deities could communicate to him. They could also communicate and tell him that we are not happy, they're not doing this. Yeah. He could receive intimation from the deities. Then he would turn around and blast the management team and the pujaris, etc., that your standard has really fallen because the deities are so unhappy. Sometimes he used to walk into temples and he used to stand before the deities in meditation. And after meditating on the deities, he used to have a big, big sunny smile on his face because the deities were happy and he could observe that the deities were well taken care of. So the point I'm trying to make is that in more recent times, you can observe this. Worldwide, I have seen, to be honest, without mentioning a place, there was a lot of inauspiciousness in one temple, and this is several years back. And the deities had already left, even though the murtis were there. How do we know this? Is that there was some kind of a person who was very depressed, who practically hung himself in the temple courtyard. You can just imagine how intense a circumstance is that someone who was also a devotee, he was very depressed because he had some issues. He goes and sleeps in the temple in the night along with the other brahmacharis, gets up in the morning, and whilst they were all sleeping, he commits suicide by hanging himself from a tree which is in the courtyard of the temple. Can you imagine that particular circumstance of how inauspicious that is? This would never happen if the deities were present. The deities were present in the sense that the murtis were there, but the essence of the deities, which is Krishna himself being in the murti, had left. Because if the deities were present fully, they would have woken somebody else up. They would have woken someone else up to stop that person from doing this. The fact that nobody could wake up and stop this person, this devotee, to wake up in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and then, hang himself in the courtyard of the temple is proof that the deities were not present in the temple. If not, they would have woken up someone. Someone would have just woken up because they wanted to protect the temple. They would never have allowed this to happen. It's such an unfortunate and such a negative event happening in the courtyard of the temple. I've observed it. And that temple, prior to that, had all kinds of politics, intense politics, to the point where devotees were thrown out, etc., etc. There was just way too much politics going on, to the point where it was very disrespectful to devotees, senior Vaishnavas, etc., etc. So that whole yatra basically has to bear the consequence of such unfortunate circumstances. And Krishna basically allowed this to happen. Why did he allow this to happen? Because of the same circumstances that we read now. Very inauspicious circumstances had already come to the temple. And what were those circumstances? When there's such infighting, such disagreements, so much politics, etc., etc., then the deities, being very displeased, they just depart. And then chaos descends into the particular yatra. I've observed it. I've seen it personally as well. Because my observation when I heard the news, this person was known to me, and this is several years back. My first observation, I was telling someone the deities are not there in the temple. Because if the deities were there, they would have woken up someone else to prevent this particular unfortunate event from happening. They just allowed it to happen. Then how do you keep a temple open after this event? Because the whole community knows that this happened. So you shut down the temple. Krishna practically destroyed the temple. Finished. They had to close down. The point I'm just trying to make is that this is real. Inauspiciousness can be observed and outcomes can be observed. And the deities, basically, if they're present, they would bring great auspiciousness. So if the deity worship standards are very good, you will find all kinds of wonderful things happening. Wonderful things happening. The opposite is true if the deity worship standards are poor. The temple deities are very different from the home deities. The distinction is the deities in the temple are, that's Kṛṣṇa in his house trying to receive guests. Deities in the home, they are our guests. So they tend to have a little bit more of a relaxing standard. In the temple, if you don't maintain the standard that Kṛṣṇa wants you to maintain, because that's his home, then there are going to be all kinds of problems. So this is very important as devotees for us to understand that Kṛṣṇa consciousness is real. Because we are so impersonal all along in our lives, we don't realize that the deity is Kṛṣṇa. Kṛṣṇa consciousness is real. The deity is the Archa Vigraha. That's Kṛṣṇa himself, completely non-different. He gets pleased, he gets displeased. So all of this is an observed truth. Now Yudhishthira Maharaj is making that statement, saying something must be so wrong because the deities don't seem to be happy. He himself is an advanced devotee. He's able to observe that the deities don't seem to be happy. He's saying they want to leave. They seem about to leave. Okay, so now we stop here and we will continue further. Let's just read the next verse. Sorry. I think that these earthly disturbances indicate some greater loss to the good fortune of the world. The world was fortunate to have been marked with the footprints of the lotus feet of the Lord. These signs indicate that this will no longer be. So this is the conclusion which Yudhishthira Maharaj is reaching. So now what do we take from this? If Kṛṣṇa is present profoundly in the Archa Vigraha form, in the form of the names, in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam being discussed, glorified, devotees constantly trying to work on themselves so that they could endear themselves and become much better servants of the Lord, all kinds of reversals of inauspiciousness occur. All kinds of reversals. The opposite is true if Kṛṣṇa consciousness is very mild and to some level, I would say, not very, what I would call as profound as it's supposed to be. So we'll stop here. I'll take some questions and then we will end for today and we'll continue again the following week.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. You mentioned that planning has to be done and you have to work out how long you got and so on. How does one do that, especially if he's getting older? Then it can be a bit of a worry that have you got time to do anything, or is there enough sufficient time left?
Yeah. First of all, at the outset, I would like to make a statement that if one is absorbed in Kṛṣṇa consciousness, the level of longevity, the time they have on the planet, is entirely controlled by Kṛṣṇa. The outcome of normal circumstances, karma controls how long we're going to be on the planet. If you're Kṛṣṇa conscious, then how long are we going to be on the planet is controlled by Kṛṣṇa himself. So are we in suitable circumstances? How long can I continue my Kṛṣṇa consciousness? Whether I'm in favorable circumstances in terms of the body, in terms of the environment, this is Kṛṣṇa's domain. We don't interfere with this. We can't really interfere with it. We can't really comment on it. So to answer your question, if we are doubtful about the number of years that we have on the planet, and that is true of everyone, it's a common misconception because of the fact that in the West, we conclude that the body and longevity are connected. But that's not true with Eastern philosophy. You can have a very healthy body and you could leave early. Or you could have a sickly body and you could go on for years and years and years with somewhat of a, I would say, difficult but long existence. So the body health and longevity are not, I would say proportionate. It's really not something which the Eastern philosophy considers as being significant. So that's the first point I want to make, because that's all we can observe. We can observe that the body is weak, so we could leave soon. But in reality, that is not true. So the first point I want to make here is that we really can't reach any conclusions based on that, even though it seems very tempting and logical to do so. The second point I want to make here is that we live in continuum. A desire to serve Krishna, if it were to be taken up in this lifetime, regardless of how long we're going to be on the planet in this lifetime or how we're going to transition into the next, there really isn't an issue, because if you desire today, you could definitely be given even fruits for the following lifetime. So we really have no reason to be worried that I'm desiring to be Krishna conscious and I'm desiring to plan, I'm desiring to move forward. How long am I going to be here? Does it even seem to be viable? No need to worry, because we live in continuum. We are spirit souls. We observe a certain snapshot, which is this lifetime, but in reality, we exist in continuum. As a consequence, desiring today and making modifications and developing deeper desires as we progress further will automatically extend these desires into manifestations in the subsequent lifetime, where the opportunity again becomes real. So again, absolutely no need to worry as to whether we will have time or not have time, because these desires can take us into a completely new direction, even if it's the next lifetime, if it's not this one.
Oh, thank you very much. Very, very clear, firm answer.
Sorry, one moment, please. I'm just going to turn this off. Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
Yes,
you're welcome.
Thank you. And I'm thinking that it does mean that our desires have to be. Our desires have to be sort of molded in a quick time, maybe, or in a long time. We don't know, and we just have to start and leave it to Krishna. Krishna can take it away straight away for you, or take his time, whatever.
Exactly, because that's exactly how it's going to be. It's basically a matter of us doing our part and leaving the results to Krishna, because we really can't control anything. What we can do is we can control how we spend our time as of today, and we can definitely control saying, even there could be some realization saying, perhaps I could have done
Hare Krishna.
with reaching that conclusion. One moment, please. Just give me a moment. I'm so sorry. I wanted to just avoid calls, and my internet turned off while I unfortunately turned my telephone off. So pardon me. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, Vijay. So did I? Or I think.
Hare Krishna. Yes, no, very, very nicely. Thank you very much. it still leaves a bit of element of uncertainty, but I think the thing is to cope with it in the sense that not to worry about that so much.
True, because one of the key highlights of surrender is to be able to cope with the vulnerability of being surrendered, not knowing what the outcome is going to be, but we keep doing what is right. So if you keep contributing to what is right, you are contributing to something wonderful, and it would definitely pay off.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Sure.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, can I ask some other question? Just for, is that okay if I ask another question? It's nothing to do with class.
Yeah, perfect. So you're saying it's unrelated to today's class? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Prabhu, Anna Prashna is it? Can anybody do it in the evenings, afternoon, or is it
Which
not?
is the Anna Prashna, which means the first grain ceremony.
Yes, Prabhu.
You see, Vedic ceremonies normally take advantage of sunlight. Vedic ceremonies in general take advantage of sunlight. That is generally what is considered to be appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah. So the point I'm just trying to make is, can something be done? The answer is I do not know. I wouldn't really say it's the best of choices, but it is what it is. I would say, if you were to ask me, it is important to do it during sunlight and during an appropriate time.
The question is, sometimes one devotee was saying it's only for the karma kanda people, you have to do it in the morning. You can do it at any time. That was the reply. So I was just wondering, is that right what the person said that? I don't know what to do. Yeah.
The only thing that you can do at any time is to chant Harinam.
Yeah, this is what
okay. Anna Prashna is Karma Kanda.
Yeah.
We are going through a Vedic ceremony for auspicious desires to be fulfilled, that the body would be sustained, etc., etc. So sometimes there is a misconception in Krishna consciousness, even within our devotees, that they perform samskaras and they think that's Krishna consciousness. No, it really doesn't have anything to do with some Krishna consciousness. Samskaras are Vedic rites. Srila Gopala Bhatta Goswami, one of the 6 Goswamis, he took all these Vedic rites and he transformed the chanting, he transformed the mantras, he introduced Krishna into them and represented it, so that as people exist in different ashramas, and if they have to conduct these Vedic rites, Krishna would be present whilst doing so. So he kind of wanted to give a means for us to move forward. But by no means can you classify this as being directly associated with devotional service, which means you don't follow rules, regulations, etc. You can chant. Yeah? Okay. So that is first point. The second is, our acharyas did not act in this manner. They were very responsible. You read that Srila Jiva Goswami, before he sent Srinivas Acharya, before he sent Narottam Das Thakur to Bengal with all our books from Vrindavan, you read that he looked for auspicious times. So auspicious times and the knowledge of auspiciousness, etc., were used then. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, even though he was a complete renunciate, he was a Naishtika Brahmachari and he was a sannyasi, he used to follow all these rules in his preaching. He basically used to not want to travel on Thursdays, so he used to do certain things so that he would travel on Wednesdays. And this was not a person who had, I would say, any desire in this world. He was completely dedicated to the movement. But if you have knowledge, and which is what the Vedic knowledge is, you use it appropriately. So you will notice this throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, where they would try and work towards bringing Krishna consciousness and auspiciousness, etc. So it's a misconception to think that our Vedic samskaras that we subject ourselves to are Krishna consciousness. It is not. It is simply a matter of purification and duty within the context of the ashram.
Yeah.
But due to the mercy of our preceptors, we have introduced Kṛṣṇa into all of that so that that becomes auspicious.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Prabhu, because I had the same same explanation. Of course, you not just like you, but I was trying to explain, but it wasn't going anywhere. They said, no, senior devotees said it's all right. It's only Karmakanda people has to observe all that. Can do that. I said, okay, that's it. I can't say anything about it. So, thank you
No,
very much.
you read in the Srimad Bhagavatam. You read in the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah,
Bhishma Dev was waiting for an auspicious time to leave. Do you read it?
yeah, but what concluded? Devotee concluded saying, senior devotee said that. That's all right. So,
No,
what am I?
Bhishma Dev basically was waiting for an auspicious time to leave the
Yes.
world.
This
So the
I
point is, if you have knowledge, you use it, and that's exactly how our and Senior devotees basically are. You know, Bhishma Dev, he is a Mahajan. He used to use it. The point I'm just trying to make is,
yeah,
it is one thing if you do not know how to do it,
yeah,
and you just don't have the sophistication to pick a time, etc., etc., and you find it too cumbersome, and
yeah,
then you do it in a manner where you're praying to Kṛṣṇa, saying, Kṛṣṇa, there's no one who can guide us in this regard, so I'm offering it to you. That is one way to do it. That is absolutely fine. But
yeah.
there is another, to simply think that because we are practicing Kṛṣṇa consciousness, we don't need to follow any rules of the universe.
It
So
was actually,
that's
I felt, Prabhu, it was a bit unfortunate because somebody said uh, the parents, they invited everybody, and without thinking this, taking some devotee who doesn't know anything, like, because later on he said, I don't know that we have to do in the morning. So now they are trying to fix it to somehow, it is okay, given this statement, we can do it any. So I left it like that.
Yes,
That
the
was
point is basically, the point I just want to make is these are misconceptions,
yes,
but you know, if these mistakes do happen,
Mm.
and yet they're serving very nicely, they're serving Kṛṣṇa very nicely, then Kṛṣṇa can make some adjustments.
okay,
Or if they're very sincere servants, then they would naturally take good decisions in life. That's the other way of looking at it. So what I'm saying is, Kṛṣṇa consciousness, it influences us in so many powerful ways that we can definitely be protected from mistakes. But to think that you know, you don't need to follow any rules because you're chanting Harinam is itself, it's a little bit of a, I would say, stretch.
yes, this, okay, thank you very much, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Hare
Sure.
Krishna. Yeah,
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
How to understand entertainment in Krishna consciousness? When you started the class, you said the entertainment for the Sudras, all that. But in Krishna consciousness, we have the concept like Krishnarte Akila Chestam. So is there any scope for entertainment? And if it is, how it should be?
See, basically, Vedic, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Vedic entertainment, those days, everything was centered around Krishna consciousness. So if you study, for example, Bharatanatyam, and I'm picking up Bharatanatyam because the accompaniment of Bharatanatyam, which is the so many different kritis and so many different classical Carnatic vocal music, it was all completely steeped in praising the Lord. Different forms of the Lord, right? Different forms of the Lord. So the point I'm trying to make is, entertainment in Vedic custom and a Vedic context was all completely connected to devotion and to cultivate devotion. So Lord Jagannath in Puri, he has his own group of dancers who perform for him before he goes to bed. Yeah. So this was entertainment where everybody used to participate, and they used to basically watch all of that, the pastimes of the Lord being enacted through entertainment. So the point I'm trying to make is that the present day entertainment is just the mode of ignorance. It's highly debilitating, and it is steeped in the same value system which the Romans had, 3,000 years back, 2,000 years back. Roman society was extraordinarily violent in terms of these kind of entertainment. Now you have, for example, people taking pleasure in seeing someone else getting beaten up. Sports, wherever in America, there's a whole billions of dollars being put in just for this, what do you call it, as mixed martial arts, MMA. And that's really basically people beating each other up to pulp in front of a crowd which is cheering the fellow who beats the other guy and pays money to watch. And this is exactly what used to happen 2,000 years back. Very degrading. And then you go home satisfied after seeing someone suffer. This is the modern standard. So the point I'm trying to make is that this is a manifestation of time, then the degradation of time. But what used to happen in the past in India, in the Vedic culture, was all entertainment, all kinds of dancing, all kinds of opulences, all kinds of wonderful things used to happen in association with Krishna.
Yeah, yes, bro. Like dramas are about
Everything. Yeah, Ramayana, for example. And you go to any part of India, all the different dance forms, you know. For example, there is dance from Orissa, there's dance from the South, Tamil Nadu, then there's dance from Kerala. There are so many different dance forms, and there was singing accompanied, and all of this was from the Ramayana, from Mahabharata, from different scriptures. So it was very steeped in devotion. This was entertainment, basically.
okay, okay. Prabhu,
Whole life was centered around the temple. The temple was the center of life. Just as we find ourselves, Srila Prabhupada created it for us. What do? When we have vacation time, we go to the Dham. When we are supposed to get entertained, we go to the temple and participate, so-called, in certain ways, in terms of meeting our friends and meeting devotees and looking at, basically participating in different festivals. This is our life. This was life in the Vedic times as well. Vedic times, this is exactly what it is. Last night, it was Radhashtami here in Vrindavan. The most important festival because it's Radharani's town. And there was such enthusiasm everywhere. There was so many different abhisheks, different temples having different tanks. And it really you could see the festive atmosphere. And then our temple here, they had the festivities in the night. And then they opened the altar again at 10 in the night. And then, where you could see the charan of Srimati Radharani, it goes on to 11:30. We were able to hear kirtan for 11:30 here in the night in our temple. So the point I'm just trying to make is that this was society, and this is the society which Srila Prabhupada wanted for us as well. He wanted us to basically depend on all of this for our so-called need for entertainment. Yeah.
okay.
Bring Krishna into everything. Yeah.
Okay. Prabhu, I have two more questions.
Yes.
See, you started saying that this material achievements, all these are meant for destruction. The time destroys everything. So no point in putting a lot of effort in that, and we need to focus our energies in Krishna consciousness. But what is your comment on like the way India is progressing, like the space exploration and mission Chandrayaan, Mangalyaan, all these?
See, basically, yeah, sure, I understand you. The first point I want to make is I want to clarify. We engage in activity in this world to the extent to which it is required for us to be able to maintain ourselves so that we could focus on Krishna consciousness. Now, one of my observations is as follows. When I'm here in Vrindavan, this is the spiritual sky, but you notice that the lack of education, material education, the local population, they are not educated materially, and they are not educated spiritually with any standard. So what do you see here? You see open drains, you see a lot of filth, people living around basically not understanding what is right and what is not right, etc., because they neither have an understanding of what is right, what is wrong from a perspective of material education, neither do they have the same in terms of their spiritual understanding either. So the point I'm trying to make is that there is a need for having some level of education. And I'm observing this even in our temples. If you have brahmacharis who are very well educated, the temple is successful. Why? Because they're educated, they had an opportunity to go and serve, but go and be a part of the private industry, They instead gave up such an occupation because they felt that they could contribute more to society by being a part of a movement. They come into a temple and they become very powerful. So good yatras have educated devotees. So I'm not against material education. I'm not against material education at all. There's also a certain sense of understanding what the world is requiring, because how will you relate to people when you preach? You see, the point is, how will you relate to people when you preach? So, for example, we had one of our gurus, Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj. He was Dr. T.D. Singh. His samadhi is in Sri Radhakund. Whenever you go to Radhakund, they have the Manipur Mandir, which is the mandir of the state of Manipur. The kings of Manipur have a temple in Radhakund. And Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj was from Manipur, so his samadhi is inside the temple. It was donated to him by the kings of Manipur. Basically, he was a PhD in chemistry, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And he basically was asked by Prabhupada to write scientific journals and books, etc., which tried to explain Krishna consciousness through to very educated people. And Srila Prabhupada used to like very educated devotees. He used to like them. The reason is because they have worked very, very hard. And that same culture of hard work and focus can come into Krishna consciousness and make our centers very successful. He really liked them too. So I'm not really against, I wouldn't really say I'm against education, I'm against material progress. I wouldn't really go and extend my statement to all that level. So, but I would definitely say that if that is all you're going to do, you're going to go the direction of the Roman Empire. It was an extraordinarily successful civilization in the West. They had water ducts, they had free-flowing water. They could basically supply water to the whole city of Rome, which had 1 million people. It's a major city. You could imagine they had 1 million people. And then they ruled over 50 million people. Yeah. So they also had, for example, sewage. Yeah, these are all things which we're talking 3,000 years back, which were very 2,000 plus years back, which are very advanced in the context of the modern. So they were good at sense gratification, big buildings. They were very good at sense gratification, which is what we see in the West. But if that sense gratification is not coupled, or rather that propensity for building and innovating is not coupled with spiritual knowledge, nothing is going to be maintained. It's all going to go to waste. That's the only point I was wanting to convey. So you can always pick and choose projects. You can say Chandrayaan, Mangalayan. India is trying to send, a satellite to the sky, to the moon. India is trying to send and gain information from Mars, etc. And you can pick and choose and say that this is right, this is wrong. I don't want to do that because, in certain ways, I would say, for example, the internet, which is allowing you and I to communicate now. This was a defense project. This was absolutely the internet was a defense project. It was an American defense project, and they had the internet set up for the purpose of wanting to use it for defense purposes. But now it's extraordinarily useful because it allows us to transmit Krishna consciousness. So we are not really against modernity. I just want to be clear. We are not against what is modern. We are not really wonderfully wanting to adopt something which is very ancient. We have no concern about what is modern and what is ancient. We have no affiliation towards what is modern, what is ancient. We are interested in using whatever is available in Krishna's service. So that's the point. So if someone comes and says that they are an expert in moon landings, and if that person also can couple that with Krishna consciousness and bring a lot of devotees who are scientifically oriented, who are good, knowledgeable brahmanas into a movement, so be it. It's wonderful. Does it make sense, Ravi?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes. Thank you, Prabhu. One last question, Prabhu. When you talked about the bad movements, such as seasonal irregularities, all that. Now, current days also, we are seeing problems like global warming and this Amazon forest is on fire. All these things are going on, and parallelly, they're talking about so many promising technologies such as artificial intelligence, IoT, 5G, or like media streaming, blockchain, so many things. There is endless things are going on. So how to understand this? Like the future is promising, or future is on seeing these bad moments, future is going towards some destruction, or how to understand this, bro?
See, basically the point I'm just trying to make is that to the extent to which all of this is going to help Krishna consciousness, they would survive. To the extent to which it takes a person away from Krishna consciousness, it would be debilitating. So there's a positive and there's a negative to it as well. So the point I'm just trying to make is our understanding has to be fairly simple. And we need to see if this can be used in Krishna's service. Perhaps yes and perhaps no. We don't know as of yet. Yeah? All of these are simply responses to complexity. Please understand this. This blockchain technology that you're talking about, Bitcoin, Ethereum, the digital coins. Why do you think that came about? That is because the governments have made the fiat currency, your pound and the dollar, are completely worthless in the real sense. So people are worried that if you give and if you put money into something which the government is controlling, and governments in general are inefficient in everything they do, then they would just make this particular enterprise of value disappear from whatever savings we have. So this blockchain technology, creating value through digital currency, all of this is simply a response to a bad phenomenon. Today, the dollar since year 2000 has depreciated 40% since year 2000, nearly 40%. Year 2000. Gold in year 2000 was $300 an ounce. Gold is $1,500 an ounce today. So you can imagine how much depreciation of the dollar has taken place in 15 years, 19, 20 years, because of all the spending on war and all the printing of money. So the point which I'm just trying to make is these are responses. Srila Prabhupada talks about the gold standard. He talks about currencies. He talks about so many things in the Srimad Bhagavatam. When we come to that section, I will share more. The point I'm just trying to make is these are responses. Technology is a response to a certain deficiency, but if the same technology is not connected to Krishna, it is not going to help anything. That's the only point. Yeah?
Yes. Yeah, but the motivation for developing all this is not Krishna consciousness at all, because they want to develop business or continue some business motive only.
Exactly. It is. They're desperately trying to reform things. They're desperately trying to escape from an outcome. But I'm saying all of this is worthy. You're trying to escape from an outcome, but if it is not connected, ultimately your life is not connected to Krishna consciousness, you really are heading towards a cliff. That's what you're heading towards. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah. Yes, bro. Thank you, bro.
Sure. Any question?
I was wondering,
Lakshmi, can you speak up a little bit, please? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
is that better?
Just a little better. Can you do a little better than this? Sorry.
Is this better now?
Yes, I can hear you.
I was wondering, in terms of like minimizing like politics at temples, if like how would we approach a situation where like when doing their service we see devotees like unhappy from like lack of support from senior management or like being unfairly criticized?
See, if there is conflict, and there is bound to be conflict because there are a group of people. Even if you have two people, there's bound to be conflict. Yeah, that's nature. Now, the point is, the idea is to be able to grow from such conflicts, understanding what is wrong and trying to be able to fix it. And it requires someone whom everybody can go to. A situation that arises where if you don't have a lot of, I would say, sadhu sangha on a continual basis, where everybody agrees that someone is a leader, etc., then there can be a lot of conflicts that can come, and then those conflicts themselves can't be resolved because no one believes that the person who is supposed to resolve them is an authority. Does it make sense? So conflicts themselves are a part of life because that's exactly how it works. There were differences between devotees 500 years back during Lord Chaitanya's time. But how it was resolved and who resolved it, that matters a lot. Unhappy devotees, for example, we read in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Nityananda kicks Shivananda Sen Prabhu. Shivananda Sen is an eternal associate of Lord Nityananda. He's a devotee of Lord Nityananda. Why did Lord Nityananda kick him? He kicked him because the prasadam for the devotees had not arrived on time. Do you get what I'm saying? He literally kicked him, saying, he kicked him on his chest and he started cursing him. Lord Nityananda did this. He wanted to basically say that I'm very upset because you haven't cared enough for my devotees. I'm very, very upset about this. So he basically wanted to basically say that message. So the point I'm just trying to make is that our movement has a tremendous amount of material on how conflicts were resolved and what is the conditioning that is required to resolve conflicts. The real issue that we are facing is of consciousness. Those of us who worked in the corporate sector, where we are trained to distrust our colleagues, we are trained to plot against each other, we are trained to basically compete, and we are also trained to accept the fact that someone else losing is okay as long as you win. You see, this is corporate training. Basically, it's very destructive. It is more intense in some environments, it is less intense in some other environments. We come from such environments, and we start working in the temple, and then we form, for example, we take on positions of temple management. And then you have the same issue coming up because consciousness has not shifted. We tend to operate as we did in the outside, inside as well. So ultimately, how do you fix anything? You fix everything by connecting it to Kṛṣṇa, and everything is needing a fix means you go back to the basics. The whole yatra, if there are too many conflicts, needs to go back to the basics. They need to look and see what is the standard of morning program attendance by devotees. Even if they are not close to the temple, are they waking up, are they chanting during the early morning hours? What is the standard of deity worship? What is the standard and the energy that's being put in festivals, etc., because that's a common event. It's a cooperative event. What is the standard that and function that is being put in the education of devotees in Shastra? And how much is being invested into it? All of these are areas where we can improve. When we improve on areas that we can measure and we understand well, which are directly related to devotional service, we would see transformations occur in consciousness as well, and conflicts becoming lesser and lesser and lesser. It's important to know that ultimately you need to break it down to the fact that people aren't doing what they're meant to do as a whole, because collectively as a whole, people are not doing what they're meant to do. There might be individual pockets of success, but whether the whole group is going together towards a certain higher destination, that needs to be examined, and that can be examined by seeing how good are we in all of these factors. There should at least be one day of the week when everybody gathers for Mangalarti. One day of the week in the yatra. Choose a day and gather for Mangalarti. That experience is important. Those of us who basically don't have the ability to wake up, get wake-up calls. What I'm trying to say is that it's a matter of cooperating and pushing forward in sadhana first. When you start focusing on the basics, you will start finding conflicts becoming lesser and lesser because consciousness improves. It should be a very simple technique of improving and working on consciousness. That is all that needs to be done. Then when you overly observe, when you observe this over a period of time, you will find that the congregation is improving. Our issue is the fact that we bring in consciousness from outside and we expect it to function normally in a spiritual environment. We are not meant to be materially efficient. We are supposed to be spiritually efficient. What does it mean? If you bring in the skills and standards of what made us successful in an organization outside and directly transplant it without bringing in the principle of cooperation, bringing in the principle of selflessness into the group, then we fail. That's the issue. Does it make sense? I'm not directly answering your question, but I'm giving you, I think, some things for you to ponder on, think about.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Sure.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes.
I have a question. It's something similar to the question this month that you asked. Sometimes when you come to Krishna consciousness, I say with the devotees, like, okay, when you're once you start inspiring from one spiritual master, and then you try to be just like get into like kind of a group, and then after that you don't want, really don't want to associate others and not to talk only this Maya. It's sometimes it's really I don't know what to say, that it's, you can really say it. So how to deal with such situation, and what best that as a person I can do if I see something like that?
So if you notice that there is groupism,
Yes.
then you should break the pattern by inviting people to programs for everybody's guru. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So,
No, not for me, Prabhu. In the temple environment, I'm saying.
no, what I'm saying is in the temple environment, the management should do this. They should basically focus on glorifying all spiritual masters.
Yeah.
This, in turn, would allow people to appreciate all spiritual masters. There should be no restriction on who is coming there and giving classes. There should be no management of people who are coming in and going out to give classes, because it's very difficult to determine who is going to inspire devotees.
Yes.
You can't really sit and say that I'm going to manage the input that is coming in into my temple room because this person is good and this person is not good, because that's your opinion. So what I'm saying is, first step, open the doors and allow everybody to come and preach so the devotees can have an experience of all flavors. The second is basically have Vyas Puja days, which devotees can celebrate of their spiritual master, but make it a culture to invite other devotees so that they could also glorify and understand the glory of other spiritual masters. So this in turn would allow people to appreciate what Prabhupada has offered. Srila Prabhupada basically made a statement very clearly. He said that I'm offering a garland to Kṛṣṇa, and in a garland there are many, many flowers. You're one of those flowers. And the garland is supposed to pull and push and take all the flowers along. So that's exactly what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to understand that we are a garland.
Yes.
And that's very important. So this is, see, these are all principles that have to be very closely examined, that whenever you examine that there are divisions coming in people's hearts because they categorize themselves that they belong to a certain guru, they belong to a certain group, they belong to a certain kind of region, etc., then every effort should be put in to break that concept, because that particular division of I'm such and such is in itself falsehood. It is true to some extent, but it is falsehood, because then you are basically bringing in a lot of disparity and division. It is a material concept. The material world, there's so much in terms of differences amongst people. Very few people look for commonality. So commonality has to be encouraged and they have to be brought forth. So it's an important question, but I'm just trying to say that it requires a lot more effort to make things work. It requires changes, it requires an attitude, it requires to be seen as a project to change this consciousness.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, to say that my father is the only one who is responsible to take care of me, my uncles and aunties are useless, is itself a wrong statement. So
Very true.
this is, it's the truth, right? I mean, everybody has contributed. They say that it takes a village to raise a child. So in a family, to just claim that I was raised by my father, I was raised by this person only, and then no one else contributed to my life, that's falsehood. That's in fact a premise for a lot of division and issues. But instead to appreciate that I have uncles who are also as qualified as my father, they're inspiring people from so many different areas and they're doing such wonderful work. This appreciation is basically a proper Vaishnava approach.
Yeah, what I feel, it's like if you are not respecting them, it's like you are not happy with your nieces and like your cousins, because you're only thinking of your, so this is what I felt.
Also, Mataji, sometimes, just want to comment on this very briefly, sometimes this attitude also comes from a sense of accomplishment.
Okay.
And the sense that they've been aspiring for someone and then they get initiated and they feel very proud about being associated with the Guru Maharaj. So it's more of a matter of pride.
Okay.
It may not just come from feeling that they're superior. It comes purely that I'm wanting, I'm with my God brothers and God sisters. I'm so happy to be accepted into this God family. I'm very thrilled. And that practically is also something which pushes out I'm different from others. The point I'm just trying to make is these are again problems, but you require to strategize to remove these problems. We can't ignore them because these divisions can create havoc in the movement. We can't ignore them. We should not ignore them because they can create a lot of havoc when people start thinking that their guru is the best and everybody else's guru is not quite up to it. This is havoc. It can cause a lot of divisions and havoc in the future. And it should be always so that we encourage everybody so that we basically appreciate all the Vaishnavas so that this way there is a great urge to learn from everybody because there are so many devotees who have sacrificed in so many different ways for Srila Prabhupada. Learn so much from each and every one of them that ignoring that is itself trouble. Because let's look at it from a different angle. It is considered to be trouble because the material world is unpredictable. If you're just going to have one identity and that gets destroyed, then you don't have any support system. Then you fall into an abyss. You fall into trouble, chaos. Because this happens when the guru passes away, and all in a sudden they find that there's no one to support them because they've never cultivated such connections. So these are all quite dangerous propositions in Krishna consciousness. These have to be understood and managed nicely from a management perspective. Is there anything else?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Okay.
On the point you mentioned, like looking at the deities, we can understand whether they're existing or not, they're happy or not. So can we understand that at our home, in our home deities as well?
Well, in the home deities, see, basically, I'll tell you something that you should follow. Not for the home deities, in general. Receiving information from subtle phenomena, receiving information from, can you put yourself on mute, Prabhu? Prabhu? Yeah. Receiving information from subtle phenomena, such as the deity's mood in the atmosphere. This is somewhat unreliable because we may get our readings wrong. What is best to follow is a good standard. So set a standard which can be measured, which can be observed, and you follow it. If you feel that that standard is not being followed, then you start looking to see how to fix it. It's difficult for average devotees, and we consider ourselves average, for us to basically stand before the deity and figure out whether they're happy or not. You can't do it. So it's better for you to see what is appropriate as a standard and monitor to see if that standard is being followed and see where you can improve.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu.
Sure. All right. If there aren't any more questions, then we could conclude.
One
Is
small
there
question,
anybody who
Prabhu.
wants to? Yeah, please go ahead.
Is there any book which discusses about this woman's in Shastric way, that Nimitta Shastra you said, right? Can you please suggest if any?
Yeah, well, see, there are books. Skanda Purana is one of them. There are Puranas which talk about it, but this information is basically laid out across the board in different Puranas as well.
Okay, bro. So you didn't come across any book compiled at one place? All this.
See, well, I haven't. See, there is. It normally is a part of a whole body of knowledge. It's really. I haven't been able to find any one book which is really super good in this particular area.
Okay, bro. Okay, thank you, bro.
Sure. Okay, so we'll end for today and we'll meet again next week. We will conclude chapter 14 And we will try and see if we can conclude 15 as well, because the theme and the chapters are more or less the same. So thank you very much for joining me. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.